on the engine of our car will have several English letters,
such as VVT, VVL, CVT, CVD, etc.
What do these English letters represent? These letters actually represent the valve technology. Different letters correspond to different technologies, but they all have one thing in common. Compared to previous engines with these technologies have stronger power and more fuel efficient. Today we will explain these engine valve technologies. Even if you are a newbie, you should be able to understand. Boss, please give me a like first. Let's start to explain. The power and fuel consumption and the intake efficiency of the engine are directly related.
Because fuel needs to be mixed with air to burn.
If there is more air and less fuel,
The combustion temperature of the engine will be very high,
it's similar to the blower used by blacksmiths,
causing the engine's metal parts to expand and deform.
deformation. If there's less air,
And more fuel. The fuel combustion is not sufficient,
causing more carbon deposits, less power.
so the fuel and air burn in the engine.
There is an optimal air-fuel ratio. 14.7 kilograms of mixed with 1 kilogram of fuel is the best combustion efficiency,
Which neither causes the engine to overheat.
nor insufficient combustion. So the amount of fuel injected is based on
The real-time air intake of the engine.
the ACU recognizes the engine intake volume through sensors
And the air-fuel ratio combined with the air intake.
to determine the fuel injection amount.
The purpose is to more precisely control the air and fuel economy when driving fast.
The engine needs more power to increase the intake efficiency, and the injector sprays more fuel. The power will be stronger when idling or driving slowly,
The engine only needs to maintain normal operation.
but fuel saving is more needed, so the intake efficiency is reduced, and less fuel injection to reduce fuel consumption and reduce engine carbon. In the past, for cars, the throttle valve controlled the engine's air intake, which is our accelerator pedal. Before the air enters the engine, it has two pass-through valves. One is the throttle valve, we just mentioned, can only control the approximate air intake and not very precise. The other is the intake valve, and the throttle valve
And the opening and closing timing of the throttle.
is the camshaft.
This is the camshaft structure of a traditional engine.
One end of the camshaft is a gear, which is connected to the crankshaft. To the engine crankshaft, the crankshaft rotates twice.
The camshaft above rotates once.
When the camshaft rotates once, the cam on the camshaft will push the intake and exhaust valves open.
The time for the cam to open the intake valve once.
Is the timing of the intake valve opening during the intake stroke of the engine cylinder. Opens the intake valve to suck air into the cylinder.
During the exhaust stroke, the exhaust valve. To expel the burned exhaust gas from the cylinder.
It should be noted that
The speed of the camshaft is synchronized with the crankshaft.
the depth of the cam opening the intake valve is also constant. That is to say,
The opening time and depth of the intake valve.
are fixed, remain unchanged. Whether driving at high speed or low speed, remain unchanged to more precisely control the intake air. More air at high speed and less air at low speed. So there is valve technology. Valve technology is divided into two types. One is variable valve timing. VVT can change the opening and closing timing of valves
At high speed, it opens the intake valve early.
to inhale more air and mix more fuel to burn to obtain more power,
At low speed, the intake valve opens late or early.
to reduce the intake of the cylinder, which can reduce.
And fuel injection to save fuel. But each car company has a different name.
Honda calls it Tech. Toyota calls it VVTi, Volkswagen calls it VVT, BMW calls it Valvetronic, Mercedes-Benz calls it Camtronic.
Another is variable valve timing.
VVL can change the opening size of the valve. When driving at high speed, the intake valve stretches deeper, and the intake valve opens wider, which can suck in more air
And more fuel can be burned to generate power.
to obtain more power. At low speed, it stretches in a little shorter, and the intake valve opens less. Inhale less air, and less fuel is more energy efficient. Each car company has different names. BMW calls it Valvetronic, Nissan calls it VVL, Audi calls it EVS. Toyota still calls it VVL. Next time,
We will talk about the different implementation methods.